Good afternoon. It is now 1 o'clock and we will go ahead and get started. We want to welcome you to our National RTAP webinar series on mobility management. Our first webinar today will be titled Mobility Management Compliance Understanding FTA-Eligible Activities. And we have a nice overview on mobility management compliance. We've had a lot of questions, whether you are with the state DOT or a nonprofit host agency, a transit agency, and many other organizations that host mobility management, navigators, ambassadors, coordinators, or any of the names that you may be. And so today we're going to give you a quick overview and then also mention that very shortly we will have an in-depth e-learning with some nice guides and checklists and things that we'll be rolling out to kind of give you a little more detailed information as we only have 1 hour today. So we will go ahead and get started. It looks like we still have a few people logging in here. And if you wouldn't mind, while we are pulling this up, if you go ahead and drop your name and your organization and where you are from. I want to introduce you to our team of experts here. I'm not going to read everybody's name off, and some of them are on the call, but I certainly want to just make it known that we have a whole team here that is here to assist you with all of your rural transit and your community needs, whether it's from the planning side to the technology side, the coordination, the grant writing side. And so please feel free to reach out at any time to any of our National RTAP staff. We are certainly here to help you in all aspects of your rural transit needs. Today, our presenters will be me, Anjali Dixon, as the Rural Transit Project Manager, and then also Jeremy Bell, who's also joined me. He's our Tribal Transit Liaison. So we want to kick it off with what exactly is mobility management. And while there is a defined statement for mobility management, I will not read the whole paragraph to you, but it's basically a strategic approach to coordinating transportation services in your community. We also want to definitely emphasize that it is across multiple providers and also the cross-sharing of funding sources, which makes sure that your systems and all the modes that you are managing are sustainable, that they are there long-term and not short-term. This is definitely important for those who are the users of the service. The primary focus on mobility management is coordination. And that's the key word there. It does play a very crucial role, primarily in the 5310 and 5311 services that are provided in communities. Some of the key programs that support mobility management, the key FTA programs are 5310, 5307, and 5311. 5310, if you are not aware, is the Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities. 5307 is the Urbanized Area Formula, and the 5311 is the Rural Area Formula Program, which is primarily what our Center National RTAP focuses on. However, we do want to stress that a lot of the service providers do use a combination of these formula fundings to help support their mobility management services. Mobility management as a capital expense is normally what it is listed under. And so the funding structure and how it's normally laid out is that it's eligible for 80% of the funding, and then there's a 20% local match. And we've heard a lot of the questions of, well, how do we get our local match? And that's a whole nother webinar presentation. However, at the end, we will try to answer those questions, and there are some unique ways that you can do that. But I just kind of want to throw that out there. That is an 80-20. Lead organizations, maybe a public transit agency, it could be a nonprofit. In some of those examples, it could be a United Way. It could also be an RPC, a regional planning commission. It could be a COG, a council of governments. There's a lot of different organizations that may host mobility managers. And then planning requirement is very, very important, that it needs to be included in your locally developed plan and in your coordinated plan. So example of eligible activities. This is very, very important. Number one, coordination and planning. We need to make sure that that this is directly supporting your mobility management position, that is not supporting any other positions, your maintenance staff, and things like that. It also goes towards they will be at the table, or they may be the ones that are developing your coordination plans and also updating your coordination plans and maintaining it. They're also in charge of those planning initiatives and coordinate all the different types of shared mobility in your area. And then also, they are the ones that are, in charge of the regional coordination meetings, the regional forums, the town halls, and in charge of the stakeholder engagement, the roundtables. And Jeremy, he's going to talk a little bit more about how they do that in his area a little bit later at the time. Number two, another set of eligible activities is, we've all heard of this on the information and referral services side, is the one call, one click. It is a one-stop shop that your mobility manager or the mobility management team that you're hosting in your organization, that they may hold that one-stop shop for everything. You may be able to call them and schedule a ride, maybe get passes, they may get referred to another agency or another organization who is scheduling rides, and that could be, say, VA to a VTS coordinator, just for an example. But that one call and one click is very, very important. That is an eligible activity under mobility management funding. The comprehensive trip planning tools and resources is another one. And that can include something that can be like an app, something such as Ride Sheets, which is a new program that we have rolled out that's been very, very helpful. And a lot of mobility managers in the regions have taken that on to really assist with coordinating and planning and ride dispatching. And then also one centralized customer service area. And then the coordination and integration of all the different transportation databases to make sure that it's a seamless multimodal system. And then number three is outreach and training programs. Travel training is a really big one that we hear about. And usually it's for seniors and people with disabilities, but there are some great, great programs out there, and we will have more information posted on that and the more detailed e-learning on rural travel training, because rural areas, there are a lot of different parameters whenever you're doing travel training in rural areas. Are the roads really accessible? Is it a paved road? Is it a rocky road? Are there railroad tracks? Sometimes it's not a road there at all. Sometimes it's a dirt road. Are there sidewalks and different things like that? So your travel training may look a little bit different than if you were in an urban area. Also public education and just making the riders aware that your system is actually there. And also what the first and last miles may be at the beginning to get to the system and at the end to get to their next destination. So campaigning is very, very important. And that goes into kind of some unique ways of outreach, whether you're going back to the old way of maybe radio broadcasts, or maybe it's a TV commercial. There's so many different things that you can do when it comes to outreach and training of the programs. Staff training for transportation coordinator. This is huge. Is your staff properly trained? And not necessarily just the mobility managers, but all of the staff that is in your organization, that your program that hosts mobility management and also transportation as a whole. Not that they're not aware of what you do and they're not aware of how transportation is coordinated. However, it can't just be one person. It can't just be the mobility manager that knows about the transportation coordinator, knows that you have some sort of transit system in your community. And so having those different types of training, have them do a ride along, have them learn about the different modes, give them a sheet so that they can refer to, have them go along on the travel training. It goes a long way so that they are well aware. Community outreach and engagement is very important as well. And some examples are thinking outside the box for your community outreach. We know that for a long time it was, well, we may set up kind of a public town hall. We may just go to the senior centers. We may put a flyer at the church, but stepping outside the box, maybe you bring a bus to the farmer's market. Maybe you partner with your Uber and Lyft rideshare, and maybe, they provide that first and last mile to, the local town festival. Maybe they provide the last mile to the food pantry because the bus gets them to a certain and it doesn't go beyond that area. So those are some of the community outreach and engagement activities, bringing other partners in. Also, going to events that are kind of like the, Rural Transit Day, right? And maybe hosting one of those at your city square. Those are really, really important to kind of thinking outside the box, doing a bike rodeo, things like that. And that was an example from Kansas. And I had never heard of a bike rodeo a long, long time ago until they started doing it in their area. And they bring buses out and bikes, and they do all these really, really cool things to get the community involved. And then number 4, operational support. So scheduling and dispatch is very, very important. Now, let me pause on this, and not to say that your mobility manager should be sitting there and scheduling and dispatching the rides. So I do want to say that, but really honing in on, the coordination of the scheduling dispatch across the different modes and managing those modes is what we mean when we say that. The volunteer program management is very important. We know that there are more and more different models of volunteer driving that is popping up. And so we're very, very grateful for that. And if any of you all have any, or you've implemented any new ones, please share that with us. And then also the interagency coordination. Almost every state has an interagency council. It may be at a state level, maybe at a regional level, and then there are some at a local level. And so that coordination is important, and that's an eligible activity of putting one of those together and making sure that that is operable. And then technology systems that support the coordination as well. So compliance requirements and some restrictions, and this is just kind of a short, direct list. Are you in the coordinated plan? Was it approved? Do you meet the FTA eligibility guidelines? Are you documenting things properly? Are you reporting things properly? Do you actually have a system in place to document and report? And that maybe to your host agency, also to your DOT. That's very, very important. Are we just kind of jotting things down on a piece of paper and we don't know where it goes? But we need to have some sort of system that we can go back and we can refer to. Are your match requirements satisfied? And also, are you describing the actual proper activities in your application, right? Are you saying one thing but doing another? Or are you saying you're doing this, but you're not actually doing the outreach? You're not actually implementing the certain programs. And also, does it actually support coordination and not just operations, right? So if I put in my application that I'm hosting a mobility manager, these are the different types of coordinated activities they'll do, the outreach, and they should actually be out in the field doing that, or are they actually sitting there and they're dispatching rides? So ask those kind of questions. And like I stated before, the e-learning, we will have a very thorough compliance checklist for you to follow. And this is not anything that's required by National RTAP or by FTA, but it's just kind of a guide, because this is something that you can make on your own. And Jeremy will talk about and show you a reporting list that is required from the state where he lives, and kind of the checks and balances that they use there. The ineligible activities are pretty direct and to the point. Direct service operations, vehicles and dispatchers, that's a no-no. Like, that's not what this is used for. Capital purchases, general outreach, that's not related to transportation, and then vehicle maintenance and operating the vehicles. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy Bill, who was formerly a transit director with Mississippi Band Choctaw. And then also, he was a mobility manager in Mississippi. Jeremy has a very extensive background in mobility management, also very extensive background in grant writing, and actually winning those grants to make sure that his system remains sustainable and thriving for years. And I also just want to highlight that Jeremy has been very strategic in making partnerships between tribal and non-tribal, developing MOUs between the cities and other entities to make sure that they have a well-coordinated plan, and also a well-coordinated system in his areas and the outlining areas to make sure that people can get where they need to go, and whether that's to school, to work, to doctor's appointments. He's been very, very successful in doing that. And so if you have any questions on how to coordinate that better, how to bring those people to the table, how to develop those MOUs, he is definitely your guy who can help you with that. So Jeremy, I'll pass it over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeremy Bell. I am the Tribal Transit Liaison for National RTAP. And just as she was saying earlier, I used to be the manager for Choctaw Transit in Philadelphia, Mississippi, which I served as director as well as the mobility manager prior to becoming assistant director, then director. I just wanted to highlight some areas about regional mobility management and how the network works. And I was just going to give you my experience in Mississippi. One of the things that we had to do is manage strategic planning processes with a team to develop opportunities to help achieve outcomes registered related to greater mobility in the region. We did a lot of talking with a lot of our agencies that was a part of our group, which was the East Central Transit Action Group, or we called it Easy Tag. There was 6 regional groups in the state of Mississippi, in which each one had mobility managers who are in charge of the 6. And the mobility managers would report to MDOT about our duties and anything that we had that we were facing problems or any ideas that we had in our area. The mobility manager, we also had to research funds available, assessing the needs and demands of users, reviewing regulatory processes, and seeking alternative services such as mileage reimbursements, volunteer drivers, vehicle sharing, mobility training. Majority of the time, we were also looking for ways of trying to generate revenue for not just our transit agency, but with also our agencies within our region group. I mean, we weren't just in charge of our area, as we were told, you're not the mobility manager of your current agency, you're the mobility manager of the regional area. And that's how we introduced ourselves. We also assisted with recommendations to improve mobility services and or coordination with, but not limited to, the region and other relevant organizations. Case in point is that even though we worked with our agencies within the state of Mississippi, we also worked with regions outside our areas so that we could try to provide transportation to our Mississippi clients who needed it. As we would sit there and say, we'd try to move Mississippi 1 mile at a time. Anjali, would you? All right, thank you. Um, we had to facilitate communication and cultivate multi-agency partnerships to reduce costs through efficient and effective transportation coordination. Majority of the time, we always asked our groups to come together to see if there was any gaps in our areas that we possibly could work together as a team to try to create connection points. If not, in some cases, we had areas that we call gray areas, in which we talk to other agencies in other regions to say, hey, we do not have any transportation in this area. Would you please assist us, and would you be able to send a vehicle in there to help them out? We weren't just so much focused on what we could do in that area. We also made phone calls around to other mobility managers to see if there was something we could do together. Or in some cases, we had emergencies where we had to work together in order to get transportation in areas that really needed it. We maintain current agendas, packets, and minutes, and post information pertinent to stakeholders. Every time we had an Easy Tag meeting, we always kept our minutes. We kept copies of it, and we also submitted it to MDOT, showcasing them what we discussed, any new goals, any new problems that we had. We would submit that to them and then have a sit down and talk with them to see if they could assist us in possibly solving some of those problems. The one thing I can say about working with our DOT was that we had an open line of communication with them. It was great. They worked together. We worked together as a team in Mississippi. Develop an information outreach program for current transportation services and mobility options through public speaking and media presentations, including development of outreach materials and marketing plan. As someone said it best, we were the face of our transportation company when we came in as mobility managers. We represented our transit agency, which mine was Choctaw Transit, but we also served as the face for Easy Tag, which was our regional group. So we were currently going out and doing public hearings, comments, going to community development clubs. We were going to job fairs, anywhere where we could promote transportation or help out. We were going out to different areas, setting up booths and talking to everyone. It also helped out with our hiring program too, as it also helped us hire new people coming in looking for work, which we partnered up with the Mississippi WIN, our Workforce Investment Network, which was the Mississippi Department of Employment Security. So we worked hand in hand with them also in regards to transportation. Research, write, and coordinate the grant application process, manage grants and grant proposals, and maintain a funding donor database. Majority of the time, what we did was we worked with the 5310s and 5311s, in which we came up each year. We did the grant writing process. And whenever we had a brand new agency to come in, or anyone asking to look into trying to get 5311, we would work with them. We would sit there and we would talk to them about the process, about going out and finding stakeholders, going out and finding matching funds. Whenever they needed paperwork done, we were sitting there saying, okay, this is what you need to do. Um, Come to me. We'll take a look. We'll sit down. We'll discuss this. We'll see what all you need to finish out. And then we kind of give them the ins and outs, like this is what you need to look out for. This is what you need to focus on. This is what we need to do. And during the time that I worked as a mobility manager, I actually helped two different agencies create their own transportation agency, and they were 5311s. We held quarterly meetings with all transit agencies and our regional groups to discuss coordination and issues that each agency is experiencing with their counties. That was what we call the Easy Tag meeting. We came together as a group and talked to each other about any problems that we had in our counties or counties surrounding us in the Easy Tag region. Now, that was not the only time that we met. When I was a mobility manager, we were told that we needed to go do site visits. Now, the main reason for the site visit was one, you actually got to go to the agencies that you were serving to sit down and to see their operations at work. And also during that time, they would also divulge like they had smaller problems that they never brought to the Easy Tag meeting. And that's when I was training mobility managers in the past, I would sit there and say, that's one of the things you need to do. When you make a site visit, that's where you're going to find some of the problems that will not bring to the table, and you can actually be a solution for that. One of the solutions, I'll give you a story about one of them. We had one that had just started a 5311. They were operating out of a block house in Macon, Mississippi. So when they got funding, they actually got enough money to go to another area, which was they got a lease for a new office. Well, during their process over there, they realized they needed new furniture and they did not have anything in the budget. So they came to us one day. We were just discussing about, hey, what can we do to help you? Is there anything you're looking for? And jokingly, they said we could use some new furniture. So with us being backed by our tribe, we actually have two casinos, and so we have surplus and some furniture and all. So I went and talked to my administration, which is our chief, and discussed with them like, hey, we have a agency that works under us, and they work with us side by side, and they've been very helpful to us. So wondering if the tribe would be able to assist. So with them, we were able to go out and get furniture that we had on surplus, and they were able to pick what they wanted. And we actually hauled it over there to their new office, and we furnished their whole office free of charge. And so that was one of the things that we were talking about mobility management. You became the voice for the smaller agencies. If they needed help, you went out and you went and saw if you could try to get some help. And so that's what we did as mobility managers in our region. The mobility manager will conduct the meeting and take minutes for reporting purposes back to the state DOT. Majority of the time, we took the minutes, we went over solutions. We always had to come up with brand new talking points. Also, we had to make a goal that we were planning to reach before the next meeting coming up. And so at the end of the presentation, well, further on down, I have a copy of what we were expected, which was our quarterly reports. And so I'll go over it with you briefly with you. Also, the mobility manager can contact any other groups that they needed in the event that they needed assistance. Um, right now, what we did was regional trainings in this area. We coordinated with regional groups that says if a collaboration can occur to provide transportation areas within limited or no transportation areas services. So we constantly work with other regional groups to provide services outside our scope of our area, and we actually work together as a team to try to fill in gaps that was what we call the gray areas. We actually coordinated with DOT to see if assistance can be given for pilot projects that can create transportation routes in the region. And that wasn't just the only thing we did too. Um, we had a shortage of past certified instructors. So one year we decided, hey, why don't we get together And we have a couple of past instructors who can come in. And we partnered up with Mississippi State, which was at MSU Smart. And they had the meeting space. They were able to get some other teachers and instructors in. And so we invited everyone from across the Mississippi to come in and say, hey, we have a training course coming up, a pass certification and training. If you have brand new drivers coming in, please come in with us. You're welcome to come join us. And we kept the fee small, but we worked together as a team. We did regional trainings in Starkville, and to this day, we still work together as a team, and also never, and just like Mr. Miller said, never underestimate your local universities. They actually were some of the biggest help for the smaller agencies too. One of the agencies did not have the um, funding to create their own individual staff badges. And so Mississippi State got their marketing group in, and they created badges for these for this small transit agency we had. So we worked together as a team in order to keep everyone going afloat in our area and to provide transportation within the Easy Tag region. And like I said, it just wasn't there. Also, we also worked with the other five other regional groups in Mississippi. Now, this is what I wanted to show you right here. This is a map of our areas. You have Delta Rides, which is in the Delta, which was the west part, northwest, west area of Mississippi. You had Transcon, which was in Dead Center, which was like the capital city of Jackson and surrounding counties. Smart, which was in the southwest area. They provided transportation at their little section of Mississippi, of southwest Mississippi. Ride the Smile, which has now been labeled NITA. It was the northeast area of Mississippi, and there we were. We were East Central Transit Action Group. We were East Central Mississippi, near the Alabama border, and you had Southern Connect, which we had Miss one of the mobility managers in the call today, Miss Donna Bailey. She is one of the mobility managers for Southern Connect, and one of the main inspirations I have today for being where I'm at right now, because she was inspiration in the work she does for Southern Mississippi. So, outreach partnerships for coordination Mississippi, promotion of transportation services in their regional area by, and this is what we did. We went to public hearings and comment sessions. We would hold those. Most of that was for the 5311 application that we had to do each year. We would host it in like January, February, invite the public. We had to put ads out in 3 newspapers across our area. So we would let them know what time we were doing the sessions, what time they had to come in and give us their comments about us. Were we good? Were we bad? What can we do to make our services a lot better? Also, we had city council meetings. There were times that we would go to different city halls and go to council meetings and sit in and just tell them what we were there for with the transportation services that we provide. That was one of the things that started up the MOU with the city of Meridian, between city of Meridian and Choctaw Transit. That's what created the services there, and it's still working today. That it was a non-tribal entity working with a tribal transit, and they have been going for 10 years now, and it started by going to city council meetings. Hosting community dialogues right now in the state of Mississippi. The mobility management I should say the mobility managers are tasked to do community dialogues in their region. We have done multiple dialogues in our area in which we called in local officials to come and speak to the general public about the importance of transportation in their areas. We open it up for everyone to come in to listen, and so that we can let them know what we were doing, who was involved, what transportation agencies took part. It was a great thing. We got to show the general public who we are and where they were. Job fairs, we did setups out there where we talked to them. We had some that were looking for work, but then they were also looking for transportation to that work in the event that they were hired. So they got the best of both worlds. And so we worked at job fairs. We let them know that we were out there. Development club meetings. I got requests left and right from local development clubs. Can you please come in and speak to us and tell us about your services? Which we would go over there and speak to them, let them know what our services were, what was available, and the number one thing was that a lot of them didn't know that we had ADA vehicles. Some were also uh, confused a little bit because even though we were called Choctaw Transit, some thought that it was strictly for Choctaws, and I said, no, we are 5311. We're open to the general public, which in turn allowed us to do a rebranding so that we would not confuse the general public. We actually changed our logos. We put a tribal infused design in it, but we changed the name to Community Regional Transportation so that no one would have that thinking that stigma that it was only for Choctaws because it was called Choctaw Transit. So it was through that that we started learning from the general public and evolving. Also, we did booth setups whenever we had events coming up. We would set up at fairs. We would set up at job fairs. We had also fairs that were set up in college for students about transportation area. That's where we started gaining ridership through there too, especially MCC. We always got called to come do a booth and to talk to the students about the transportation we served in the city of Meridian. And right now, what we're looking at here is our quarterly report. I was just giving you a sample of. As you can tell, we had to put our regional group name, who the mobility manager was, and the regional group leader. We were tasked to turn this in each quarter when we were have our meetings and discuss about problems, any solutions we had, and also we set up goals for what we were doing. We had to show DOT what we were doing, our regional activities, key accomplishments, increase in expansion, relationships with employees, community, colleges, universities. That was which our outreach came through. Measurable outcomes over a quarter. Was your ridership extended? Was it lessened? Um, we had to let them know who we reached out to, our local officials. Also, our success stories, in which we did have a lot of success stories because we used our services to help out people that didn't know we existed. And that was the one thing about rural Mississippi. You constantly have to go out and promote because a lot of these areas do not know that there is a transit system located nearby. As you can see on the very bottom, it said regional training needed. If we needed some help, we would let DOT know, and they would actually work with us and say, okay, we have a training session that we can set up. Do y'all want to pick a day to where we can get something up and going? The one thing I can say about DOT in the state of Mississippi is they worked with us side by side. We had liaisons who worked with us. They were our mobility management liaisons. We worked together hand in hand. If I needed something, I could get on the phone and call her 24/7. And this was what we did in Mississippi. This was our accountability, and this was our measurable outcomes by with our mobility management quarterly reports. So as you can tell, we listed all the agency hosting in which we listed every agency and what they were doing so that even the smaller agencies were not left out and the things that they were doing for their area or their community. We wanted to showcase that. We wanted to show everyone that all of us were working as a team. No matter how small the event was, how big it was, we were all together as a team. And so we'll go to the next one. And so this was a final portion of our report, and we turned it in every 15th of each month, in which we gave a basic rundown of what we were doing, average trips during our services, number of drivers, vehicles in service. They constantly checked up with us to make sure that we had, were we facing a driver shortage, which now it's that way across the United States, or vehicles, and were we possibly getting ready to do end of useful services in some of our vehicles, and so they monitored that. And so our work that we did in Mississippi was great. When I first started and became a mobility manager, I did not know what I was stepping into, but after working with it, I realized that mobility management can um, find solutions for problems and for different agencies in the state of Mississippi. But now that I'm working with National RTAP, I can see that mobility management can actually be the solution for a lot of problems that I am seeing when I visit each state. Um, that's why I was telling Anjali that the number one thing I can say about mobility management is that we can become the trainer to handle these situations and all. And so that right there, it was just a sample of my experience as a mobility manager. And I just wanted to share this with you. Feel free, y'all are have any questions, please call me, ask me, and I'll be glad to share my experience as a mobility manager. And so, with that being said, I'm going to turn this back over to Ms. Anjali.
Thank you, Jeremy. There's one more slide there, and I can kind of touch on it if you want me
Okay,
to.
sure.
So you all have now seen the report. You've all heard how Mississippi outlines their compliance and what host agencies and also what mobility managers are required to do according to their guidelines. I thought that this was a really, really great example. On the previous FTA centers I worked on, I've worked for 3 years with Mississippi, and I thought it was also really great that they included instructions on how you do these reports. Many times when we go into places, and even now, Jeremy and I can attest to, we'll go in and they'll have questions, and we don't know what to do about the compliance. They're not filling out reports, different things, but they always often forget that you forgot to tell people exactly how to complete the report. And I think providing those instructions, especially if they're new mobility managers, if they're not, kind of used to doing reports, and certainly not all the reports are as detailed as this one is. So this was great. Formerly also being with the DOT, this would tell me exactly what you were working on, according to what your application say that you were going to do if I gave you the funding. And so I think it's very, very important how it has the categories here on the left side column, and then also filling in exactly what they're looking for on the right side here. So I just wanted to point that out there. And this is also somewhat of a measuring tool. So where it has, for example, in the second part here, key accomplishments, and then it talks about, well, what did you accomplish during that quarter? And you can kind of measure what we did at the beginning of the year and how far we came at the end of the year. And it really kind of shows the progress, or on the other side, it could show the lack of progress. And then, kind of where maybe help is needed as well. And these are just a few of the photos from different convenings down at the Mississippi regional areas.
And Donna can
Oh, go
look at
ahead.
the last picture. She was actually a part of that. That's when we did a cross training collaboration between Easy Tag and Southern Connect, in which we worked together to hold a meeting in the, I do believe it was a council hall down in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, in which we brought in multiple officials to come in to speak, and also MDOT came in and spoke to the general public. Like I said, that was just some of the things we worked as together as mobility managers. We worked together as a team. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Jeremy. And so we want to touch on the hiring of a mobility manager and the compliance focus part of that. And so I'll touch on that. And also Jeremy will come in and touch on some things when they were hiring their mobility managers for their teams. The first thing I want to say is that, like I said, this is not in depth, and we will have e-learning that will go really into the in depth, like the kind of nitty gritty of the hiring part of it. But this is just kind of an overview and gives you a basis. Number one, the position, the design of it, and the role. And so often we get the question, well, what should they be doing? Do you have a job description? We really don't know what it should entail, and it is different everywhere. It's different for every organization, every agency. and depending on what the task work is for your community, what is the need, right? And so, but we do know that primarily it is going to include those people making the partnerships. They're going to be helping users of the different systems, of the different modes that they are managing on how to plan their trips to get to where they need to go. They're going to train people on how to use those different modes in your area. So whether that's using the bus, whether that's using the rail, whether that's using a bike path, whether that's even just walking, a scooter, the different ride share, any of that, all of that, right? Because all of those in many areas are integrated in the system. Um, and also, grant writing is also included. There are a lot of mobility managers that write grants, and they partner to write grants in order to make sure that their different programs are funded. And so, otherwise, without that, they wouldn't have those programs in place. Um, you do want to avoid the mobility manager having included in their position, because this is not an eligible activity, of them providing vehicle maintenance. And there's a funny story, I'm sure he's on this call, of someone who worked for a DOT, and a lot of us know him, of him doing compliance checks. And I know many of the different DOTs and organizations may not do compliance checks, but they should be. And that person was doing vehicle maintenance and was checking in mail and things like that. And they were like, this is not their job. This is not why we gave you the funding for mobility management. And so that should completely be avoided. They should not be driving the buses. They should not be doing any of that. Now, not to say that people may not be playing dual roles at time, but that definitely needs to be defined for sure. But that is not their primary job. Jeremy, do you want to chime in on that a little bit?
Once again, when we were looking for hiring a mobility manager, we had to have someone who was outgoing. We looked for someone who possibly had any experience in marketing, also some management experience, because we wanted to make sure that we had someone who knew how to uh, properly do their documentations, how to get their work in on time. If they were knowledgeable in grants, that was a number one thing that we were looking for. Um, but definitely you had to be able to speak, because you were the face of the transportation, you were the face of the regional group. So you would want someone who's going to be comfortable going out and talking, and also to the general public, but also with your local, state, and tribal officials as well, because we were constantly out there talking to all of them, constantly looking for support. And so you needed someone out there. So that was what we were looking for. We were looking for someone who was outgoing and who had some experience with these areas. And like I said, when you're a mobility manager, you're not going to sit at a desk. You're going to be out there. You're going to be on the ground running. You're going to be the main one on the ground doing the footwork. And the one thing I tell people is this: when you hire a mobility manager, I said, I want you to look at this, because majority of the people who are the mobility manager know more about the operations. They know more about the administration, the in regards to scheduling. They know all of that. And I said, and so what you want to put in put this in your thoughts is the mobility manager will eventually become an assistant director or a director, because they're so knowledgeable about your whole system. That's what you want. You want somebody who is going to learn the whole system as as the individual agency, and also as the regional on the regional level. So that was one of the things we were looking for when it came to hiring a mobility manager.
And that's very well said, Jeremy, because you need someone that's not going to be afraid to go to the table. You're going to need someone that is able to negotiate on behalf, that's also not embarrassed to have those kind of hard conversations with community partners about the need in your area. So that's very, very important. And all of that falls on mobility management, because they are the first people that you see when people are looking for access in your community. And so we'll once again have more information on that, more details on that. There's a whole list of things that we came up with whenever you are hiring for positions, and kind of so ways that you can develop, your compliances around that role. Number two is the budget classification, and that's on the grant writing side of it. And for those of us who have written the grants and have entered it in trams and all of those things, and we're not going to go into great detail about that, but that it's normally treated as a capital expense, and the line item that you would place it under, and that it is eligible for the 80/20 match, and making sure that what a local match when properly documented and tracked, of course. Number three is the integration of it, making sure that it is detailed and described in your coordinated plan. And it is also described clearly on your FTA grant application narrative, that it has clear objectives, clear goals, what counties they cover, their region that they cover, how they are coordinating. It needs to be very, very clear. You cannot just put down that these host agencies are going to have mobility managers and they are going to coordinate the modes in our community. That's probably not going to pass, and they're going to send it right back to you. It's going to be rejected. So it needs to be very detailed and very clear of what actual activities you will be doing, and even have it outlined to the extent of coverage of where you might show a map, and talk about exactly who it's going to service, what the impact. All of those details are very, very important. So it gives an overall plan and a great scope of work of what will be happening. And number
Also,
four,
what you want
go
to
ahead.
say is that they're going to be looking for milestones.
Yes. Yep, that's a good way to describe it. And for those who have not inserted those those kind of activity, those types of grants, please contact us and we could talk to you about that, because that's a whole nother PowerPoint presentation, or a whole nother webinar in itself that would take another probably 2 hours. And the number four is performance tracking. So making sure that they are tracking what activities that they're doing, the outreach, how many meetings you facilitated, how many trips that you plan, right? And so many of you all have seen on some of the different presentations that we may have done, where there's different type of reporting forms and they have different type of measurement tools that are used. For example, in Oklahoma, I think maybe Olivia Hook and her team may be on here. They use a kind of smart sheet, data sheet that they input, and then it outputs all these like amazing graphs and measure metrics, that they can use. And so they can say, who in the panhandle of Oklahoma, there's a big need. This person's doing this much outreach. And so maybe, we did pretty good this year. We did 20% more, considering that we actually don't have a mobility manager in the panhandle area, but someone kind of was taking on those calls and coordinating from way over across the state, right? And so, but it still shows that need, and it still shows what activity is going on in that area. And I just use that for an example. Also, the map that Jeremy showed, which, as you see, Mississippi is a very long state, unlike some that are very wide, but it also shows that the different regions and then how they coordinated. And one thing that he didn't exactly mention, but also coordinating outside of Mississippi across state lines is something that was often done, and shows tracking those trips planned, those different meetings that were facilitated, those different activities that happened, to ensure that there was that cross coordination, even across state lines and across with those partners, and tracking that performance, because that's very, very important to see. And it shows the need, and it shows the different rides, it shows the funding, it shows all of those different things. And that's super important to make sure that that's documented. And it shows the growth, right? So maybe there was 20% of the rides that were crossing the state lines, right? In the past, but then maybe there was a new dialysis facility, or maybe there was a new educational training site, and it's closer than going, the opposite direction. And so then maybe there was an uptick in 70%. And so that often happens. And a lot of times that's not tracked properly, and that we need to make sure that that's tracked. Also tracking how many times that you've trained writers, you train community providers as well, not even just the users, on the systems, about the systems, and how they can train those that they serve. So it leads us to documentation and best practices. Required documentation is, making sure that any of the planning meetings and coordination efforts that you have, making sure that there's records of that, making sure that you have those logs. There is a great, I want to pause there, a great new software that's coming out, Sarah Hidalgo Cook, that's down in Texas, that is a mobility manager, that has a team of mobility managers, that is a transit director there. Sarah has been very, very great. And if she can't find it to do what she needs, she will build it. And we're very, very excited. She demonstrated at the Association of Mobility Managers Conference. She demonstrated at the booth at CTAA conference. And so we're very excited that she'll go over at the National RTAP conference, but it pretty much gives mobility managers and any type of ADA coordinators, transit coordinators, what you need to track everything, to send referrals, to spit out the reports. I mean, it is like a one-stop shop for mobility management. And it can host a lot of these things that we are talking about today when it comes to the different eligible activities and things that are happening in the mobility management fields and that person is doing in their role. Financial reporting is very, very important. So that always needs to be documented. And that is part of the job. And not only from the mobility manager, but also from the host agency. So that's whether they are under the DOT that has employed them or whether it's under a planning commission or whether it's under a United Way. Everyone needs to make sure that they have that proper tracking at some level. And it may be their finance team, and that finance person needs to also kind of learn the ropes of how tracking may be a little bit different for grants and for different that fall under the Federal Transit Administration as opposed to like HUD or something like that, because there are different things that you need to track. The activity logs, you need to make sure that you are keeping those. Also, job descriptions and the hiring documentation is very, very important. And these job descriptions may change over time. Their role may transform over time. Their role and their job description may be split. You may be splitting them with another agency as well. And that's something that will be talked about in the more in-depth e-learning, because we know that some mobility managers are split between an agency and a nonprofit and things like that. Some of the best practices are engaging your partners very, very early and making them aware of your mobility managers, especially if your partners are also helping to fund that position. They will also have kind of a role in that compliance. And so if I am funding a mobility manager and with the transit agency, but also the social service agency that we are maybe in the same area is also funding them, and we have certain checks and balances and things that we want them to do, then we need to come together and making sure that we have one coordinated checklist of activities and kind of compliance and measurement tools for that person. Making sure that all activities document, linking them all to transportation needs. Also, make sure that you are documenting things all the way throughout and make sure that you're reporting everything throughout and not just half of the time, some of the time, and there's gaps. And a big thing that I want to highlight here is making sure that everybody reviews the FTA circulars and the guidance updates. So many times things happen and it may be 6 months, it may be a year later, and we go in, right, did you read this on the circular, on the guidance, on the update, there's email sent out, it's on the website. Like, we have no idea what you're talking about. So making sure that you are reviewing those, and it might take you a little bit to read through those, that you know them like the back of your hand, that you can quote them in your sleep, and that you're making sure that you're keeping up on the updates. And so this brings us to where we're going to go ahead and have a few minutes left for questions, but we just wanted to kind of point out some of the resources and some of the next steps. Some main resources that you need to make sure that you keep in contact with are your FTA regional staff, okay, for your mobility management guidance. And certainly a lot of the DOT directors have a mobility management director that is within their multimodal or their public transit division, whatever your division may be called. But if you don't, but if they also have questions, then refer to your regional staff. Of course, we're here, National RTAP, to provide the TA and the best practices. Many of us have been mobility managers. We've also formerly been in the role in the DOT level, and so we can answer the questions to the best of our abilities as well. And then, of course, your DOT, your MPO resources, RPCs, your COGS for that coordination support. And then, of course, as I stated, your regulations and your updates at transit.gov, .dot.gov. And then immediate actions that we just kind of want to give you a couple of things to focus on to make sure that if you have not done this and you've not been a part of it, make sure that you know your current plan and make sure you review your coordination plan and make sure that mobility management is included in there properly. A lot of times we review tons of plans. I probably reviewed most of them that are out there across the state, and they just kind of have a little sentence that's mentioned mobility management. And that's it, and nothing else. But it's not detailed enough, and it needs to be a little more detailed. There really should be probably a whole page at minimum of mobility management and activities and how it relates to the public transit and the coordination of it in your area. Um, also, assess the existing activities and against the FTA eligibility criteria, right? Are these the right activities? Does this fall under the criteria, right? And I think for the most part, everyone's doing great things and you're probably within the criteria, but just make sure that you check yourself on that to make sure that they are eligible activities. Also, make sure that if you don't have any type of reporting mechanisms now, or if you have not been documenting things, then make sure that you establish that immediately, meaning like tomorrow, establish documentation and reporting procedures. And if you need help with that, we can help you with that. We can also refer you to other mobility management networks that have some very, very thorough processes. And you can start small and then expand that process. Also, make sure that you're holding those coordination meetings. As Jeremy talked, they have various layers of coordination meetings and regional meetings and forums and town halls in the state of Mississippi. And they're not the only state that does that. I think it's super, super important that you have that regular communication so that you keep each other on track. And that's compliance wise, making sure that your activities are eligible and also making sure that the host agencies know what's going on and what the expectation is of the role of a mobility manager as well. One last thing that I do want to kind of leave everyone to think about is that the role of a mobility manager is that they are the face of your organization. They are the coordinators. They are the connector in your areas. And as Jeremy stated, no one should be sitting there just in their office. It is very hard to coordinate and to manage the modes and to make sure that people get to where they need to go, to bring in the funding, to make those partnerships if you're stuck inside all day and nobody has never ever seen you. And you're just kind of, like hidden. So please make sure that those people are out there. They are to be in the field. They are the boots on the ground out there. So we thank you all for attending today. Here are the QR codes for all our resources, of course, nationalrtap.org. You may go there for any of the resources and you can contact any of us. And so I just want to leave it. We have a few minutes for questions. Anything that we do not answer here, we can make sure that we provide those answers for you. So I'm going to scan through the chat real quick.
I do believe I saw Tim. Tim had a question.
Go ahead, Tim. See if we can go ahead, Tim. I see that Tim's unmuted.
And I think he's off muting.
Tim, did you want to ask your question or? Is he still there?
He'll probably jump on.
Okay. I see his hand.
If you look in the chat, I see Catherine Hardinger. She says she's a mobility manager here in rural Ohio. She has about 10 weeks to complete a rewrite for her county. And she says she does not have any regional agency and she definitely needs help. And that's what National RTAP's here for. We'll be glad to use our knowledge and services to help you out. So feel free to reach out to us.
Any other questions here? Oh, I see a new message here. Okay, Tim didn't have a question. You just had your hand up accidentally. Okay. That's all right, Tim. All right, I'm just doing one more scan here for any questions. I see a lot of comments and we are grateful for your comments. And I just kind of want to highlight where everyone is from. We have Illinois, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Ohio's here, Oregon, Virginia, Northern Michigan, Utah, Russell Council of Governments. We have a nice group here across the US here. I also want one last announcement is that we do have a National Mobility Management Handbook that will be coming out. We do have a working group, and I think you've already seen that posted. So please feel free that at any time to say, hey, I think it'd be really, really great if this, we have an idea about this, or we don't know about this and that, and this will be included. Please send us any of your feedback. We have a great group of mobility managers that are part of that group that are helping to develop that handbook, because it's all about you all to develop it and not just us. And then the other work group that we have that is currently going on that is just posted is the Rural Mobility Hub work group. And we know that there are many mobility managers that are involved in coordinating an actual hub for the various modes to coordinate in their area. So please feel free to sign up to be a part of that work group. And I think the deadline for that is sometime the end of September.
We do have a question. Sarah Cook.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
You have the floor, Ms. Sarah. I think you're still on mute.
Go ahead, Sarah. She's unmuted. I'm not sure why. Maybe she accidentally hit it.
No, she says in the chat, she says she has a question.
I'm with Sarah Cook. I have a question. Okay. Can you drop in the chat real quick and then we could get it answered, or something that we could answer after? She is unmuted. Oh, she just muted herself again. Oh, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Question. How are you, Anjali?
Hi, how are you?
Is there any best practices that you have as far as marketing is concerned to be able to afford outreach materials like swag, since we're not able to use federal or state funds for that?
Yes, we do have some unique examples of some partnerships where you can maybe obtain swag. One example was when Mississippi had a partnership with the university there, and they were doing kind of a whole slew of research. They had some research funding, and while they could not use their funding for operations of transit and things like that, they were able to use the funding to do pins, to do flyers, and to promote and have their logo on it to help assist with that program. And when the director of that division said, hey, he was like, I can't use my funding for this. But then we started to get creative with it. And we thought, okay, well, this could help us with a project that we're doing as well. And that's how they went about it, because they could use it for marketing materials in different ways. And then also, you can use your FTA funding. And right, Mike just dropped in the chat. For marketing. Marketing is an eligible expense for mobility management. For example, we've had some mobility managers, they've done full commercials on mode sharing and transit and travel training and how to get around in the community. They also developed one for to use for at baseball games that was done here in Missouri, because a lot of people ride various public transit to get to the games, put it on the news. So you can do that.
Yeah, I know we can utilize those funds for actual marketing. A lot of times when our mobility managers go out to different community events and so forth, what entices them to come to the table or to come to pick up information is, some of that swag material. And so those are the things, of course, that we can't utilize federal funds to purchase. That that's always a challenge because that kind of stuff is expensive, you know. So, you know, trying to go, we try to go into partnerships with other organizations or other funding streams that we have that are outside the transit realm. But being able to continue to afford those type of things is it sometimes gets difficult.
It is, and there are some best practices of some donors that are required that can donors that can support the efforts that you're doing. And so whether if you want t-shirts, they would have their organization's name on it that would be able to give away as swag, water bottles, different things like that. And those are the type of partnerships and just, you know, kind of
Okay.
hitting them up a little bit early. Also, some organizations, for example, I think I've given you all the example, like when someone wanted to get free passes, right? And vouchers. And the Salvation Army here, when they do a program, they just kind of call over to one of the banks and they set aside some funding they have for community efforts and outreach. And they set aside, I think it's about $2,000, and they can get passes or things for them. But they also can use it for other things and support if they define it ahead of time. And so going to organizations like that that may support you all, and of course they would want, you know, their name of course on it as well, I'm sure, which I think is okay to help get those things ahead of time for you to give out at tables and outreach. And it can help them out too because it brings people to them in the community as well.
There's also grants you can go out there too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I know there was one, my previous director had started one, and I had to finish it off. And it was business promotions and outreach. And when I finished the grant, we actually got $25,000 for strictly promotional gear. But we had to show the milestones and like how it did it. We put on a ridership, also outreach, like how many places we went, what we used it for. So there are grants out there that can actually you can
Okay. I
go
appreciate
for.
that. Hope to see y'all in December. We've got a lot more enhancements to the Mobility Connect software, so can't wait to share that with
Hey, we can't
everybody.
wait to see it. Okay, any other last questions? Well, we thank you all. Oh, Robin, did you have something? I just saw you
Well,
pop
I
up.
just wanted to reinforce Sarah. She will be presenting or demonstrating the software, her mobility management software. And we're just finalizing our sessions, but that one has definitely been picked up. And so we're really looking forward to seeing Sarah's work supporting mobility management in Texas. And the thing, one of the things that happens with 5311 and 5310 programs is your states make eligibility within the federal eligibility sometimes, because the federal eligibility allows marketing as an expense. There is, you know, as everyone knows, if people don't know it exists, they can't use it. And so one of the struggles of rural transit is to be visible in an environment where there isn't a lot of visibility. So thanks for bringing that up, Sarah. We really appreciate the work you're doing, and we look forward to working with you in Austin.
Well, thank you everyone for attending today. Please make sure that you sign up for all the updates on webinars and all of the learning tools on our site. Jeremy and I have been working really hard to churn out all sorts of things. Robin's laughing because we gave her a download that was pretty hefty on a lot of quick learning tools. And that's anything from marketing, for rural, for tribal, a lot of things on mobility management. So it's just kind of under the reviews and logistics phase of it, of getting that all flushed out of our tech system. And so we're really, really excited. But you all have a great day. We look forward to seeing you all soon.
Bye.